Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our online conversation, Unsettling the City. My name is Glenn Perkins, and I serve as the chair of CAMOC, the ICOM International Committee dedicated to cities and city museums. And I know many of you are connecting very early and very late today, but thanks to the marvels of the internet, we can really come together to learn about and have some profitable dialogue on the important issue of decolonization in city museums. Right now, we're witnessing many forms of destructive unsettling affecting our cities, our cultural heritage, and our museum colleagues in conflict areas around the globe. But it warms my heart that so many of you are willing to come together online to discuss a constructive unsettling of our cities and our museums, an unsettling aimed at breaking Western cultural assumptions and looking in new directions away from traditional hegemonic perspectives. And I want to thank ICOM Canada and the Commonwealth Association of Museums for their assistance on this program. Rachel Erickson, Director of Commonwealth Association of Museums, I'm going to turn it over to you momentarily.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Erickson. I'm the proud to be the volunteer executive director for Commonwealth Association of Museums. We're a nonprofit organization. We're based in Canada and really excited to be here today. I'm currently on parental leave, but I work for the Manitoba Museum in Winnipeg as well. And so while I'm sitting here in Scotland with my family, I'm actually based in Winnipeg in Canada. So I'm going to do a land acknowledgement from the base of CAM, which is Winnipeg, and the homeland of my nation, the Red River Métis. Thank you for joining today. We're grateful to be settled on Treaty 1 land in Canada, in Manitoba, what's now Canada and Manitoba, the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabeg, Aninawa, Nahiawak, and the Michif. The lands, water, and waterways in this place near us are the unceded territories of the Dakota and the homeland of the Red River Métis. And we are proud to engage with other Indigenous nations in our province of Manitoba, the Athiniwak, Denisilene, Anishinaabe, Inuak, and Dakota. So we do a land acknowledgement to welcome you to our space. Because of this amazing virtual experience, you're all welcoming us to your space too, and everyone's joining us from all over the world. And I know many of you also have greetings and welcome ceremonies where you're from. And these spaces are I'm really grateful for them because we can come together no matter where we are. And we know that we make these friendships and make these connections and we become welcome on each other's land. So I'm grateful for you, and I'm thankful to be here in Scotland as well as a visitor. And I'm looking forward to hearing this conversation. So I'm going to be kind of in the background for the rest of this, but thank you all so much for being here, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Rachel, both for that wonderful acknowledgement of the land and for your generous sharing of your digital space so that we can bring all these people together from lands around the world to this program. So alongside ICOM Canada and CAM, I want to also thank all the contributors to our special issue of Unsettling the City of the CAMOC Review. And in particular, the very, very diligent, tenacious, and unrelenting hard work of our CAMOC Review editor, Andrea de la Place, and her co-editors on this issue, Catherine Cole and Elke Weinstein, who are going to be our moderators for today's program, and we'll be able to pick up the thread in just a moment. So Andrea was unable to join our program in person right now, but she did record an introduction to give you a little bit of a connection to that the big themes of that issue of the CAMOC Review that I will play now, and then it will be we'll go right into the program after that. So thank you all again for being here, and bear with me one moment while I get this video playing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for this discussion on decolonization in city museums. I would like to thank you all for joining us today, and especially the team that worked on this special edition. Catherine Cole and Elke Weinstein. Thank you very much for joining me since 2023 in this project of creating a special edition dedicated to the colonial practices in city museums. Before we begin the panel, I'd like to briefly introduce the latest CAMOC review. This edition is particularly significant as it brings together a range of perspectives, case studies, and critical reflections that engage directly with decolonization practices in the context of city museums. The review aims to open up space for dialogue, highlighting not only ongoing challenges, but also practical approaches, experiments, and institutional shifts that are shaping this field. It reflects a growing recognition that decolonization is not only a single action, but a continuous and evolving process that touches collections, narratives, governance, and relationships with communities. Importantly, this publication builds on CAMOC's broader trajectory of reflection. In recent years, CAMOC has engaged with themes such as migration, with the Migration Cities project from 2017 to 2019. In recent years, also CAMOC has had a role of trying to discuss how urban identities and the role of cities in shaping social and cultural dynamics are central to the discussions of city museums. So this new edition is basically an extend on the work that has been previously done by the CAMOC committee. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and let's discuss a little bit more about this Unsettling the City, Decolonial Approaches to Urban Memory and Museums edition. And I hope to see you soon for the 2026 CAMOC review that is also coming up, but later this year. So enjoy the discussion, everyone, and see you soon in one of our CAMOC events. Thank you.
Okay, guess Glenn's not going to say something. Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Cole, and Elke, are you here? Elke and I are co-facilitating the webinar today. I'm sorry, I just can't see you on the screen. Do you want to say hello, Elke?
Sure. Hi there, everybody. Very pleased to be on this webinar with you, and welcome.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so Elke and I both came into working on this project with Andrea because of our own personal interests in decolonization as a subject, and as well as our work with city museums. So to begin, we're going to place this within the ICOM context, and I'd like to invite the chair of the Decolonization Working Group for ICOM to just introduce herself and say a little bit about the Decolonization Working Group. Hanna?
Thank you, Catherine. Yes, I'm Hanna Pennock, calling in from the Netherlands and the chair of the working group on decolonization. As a short introduction, in my daily work, I work at the Cultural Heritage Agency of the Netherlands, and there I'm specializing in colonial collections and decolonization, helping to implement the Dutch policy on this. But the working group. So we started working properly after the summer in 2023 and built together a group because nobody knew each other practically. And we managed to meet twice in person, which is very helpful to really understand each other better. And we started discussing every month online on what do we need to do? What do we think decolonization means? What do we want to do within ICOM? How can we support, for example, the new Code of Ethics? How can we work with the Legal Affairs Committee in helping them criticizing and thinking along with their proposals for guidelines, and so on. We've worked together for 2 years we still exist, actually now waiting for the new standing committee to be called for soon for the applications. We have worked a lot together. We organized several surveys within ICOM, the national committees and the international committees. And we also organized 2 meetings for Indigenous people to hear their needs and see what ICOM might do for them, and to also have their input, of course, in our work. We wrote a report. It's not published yet. We hope that will be done soon. But for us, it's ready to go. It's an evaluation of our work. It's a long list of definitions. It's an action plan. It's the report of the surveys we did. All in all, 120 pages, which we think is worthwhile. It was finished September last year, and we really hope it will be available soon for all of you and all of us, ICOM members. Catherine, is this enough as an introduction?
That's great. Thank you, Hanna. I'll just add to that I am now a member of the executive board of ICOM, and I will, when the standing committee is established, which will be following the June meeting in Paris. It has to be ratified by the General Assembly, but I will be the executive board representative on the standing committee, so I'll be continuing my work in that area. The call for people to join the Standing Committee on Decolonisation is going to be issued tomorrow. So keep an eye on your ICOM news, and if you're interested in joining the Standing Committee, please follow up after tomorrow. And they should be ready to start working in July after the meetings. So next, we'd like to talk a little bit about what is the definition of decolonisation. And I'd like to bring Prachi into that subject, because Prachi is another member of the Decolonisation Working Group who participated in the subcommittee that was looking at what is decolonisation. So Prachi, could you share your thoughts with us about that? And then Hanna will also weigh in.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm a museum designer. I'm based in India, and as Catherine said, I was part of the working group. I think decolonisation for us as the working group was probably the longest, most contested, and most passionately written definition. And I think what we've collectively sort of understood is that repatriation and restitution are a part of an entire very lengthy decolonisation process, which in itself is quite complex. It's still not even wholly understood by any of us. And as the world changes and the times that we're currently living in, we start to understand more and more of even the implications of colonization on various different social structures. Some of the things that we had as a group, even when we were debating the terminology, was we talked about the sort of non-linear process that it is. And it's an act of confrontation and an act of recognition, which is essentially what also forms the part of awareness. And therefore, yes, restitution is a part of it, but it's a part of the reconciliation act. And there's much more to be understood of decolonisation for all of us. Hanna, if there's more you'd like to add.
Yes, well, the working group is there also to advise ICOM and the museums, and also ICOM itself as a structure. And what we clearly recognize is that museums in itself are a colonial structure, and often their collections were, well, often we use the word collected, but let's say taken, which is still rather a neutral word, but taken in violential circumstances. And so museums have to recognize who they are in that sense and recognize their own history in colonial context. And that's there are so many aspects. The basic line is decolonization means different things in different parts of the world. We always use that one. And I saw also Louisa had it in her article in your CAMOC issue. This is, of course, very true. It has so many implications, the way all the objects or the cultural belongings are being kept in the museums. So how the conservation is going, and then also how they are presented, with whom they should be doing this together, in what way, in co-creation, in co-curation, and all these, the definition in our report is 1 page, just to give an idea. And maybe we're not even complete there, and we recognize it's really an ongoing issue. You can't just tick the box like we've done this, that, and that, and now we're done. It's a job for museums to continue working on. And as the standing committee will keep on saying this.
Thank you, Hanna and Prachi. Would anyone else, any of the other contributors, like to chime in?
Yes. Yes. Kia ora, Kahutu Kanawa here from New Zealand Aotearoa. For us, and I'll speak on behalf of the Māori people and Pacifica, if I can, but for us, it's about teaching our own truth, our historical truth, and we're starting with our children, because a lot of the impact of colonization is so very real, and the impact has affected us over generations and generations. And so the only way is to, decolonization is about speaking out historical truth and teaching our language through our kohanga reo, which is our language nest, so that the mind is free of what the colonialism meant for our people.
That's great, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, let's move on to the question of the relationship between cities, regions, countries, world history. Louisa, I'd like to ask you to think about that. I mean, you work in a national museum, and yet you are also concerned with cityness as a member of CAMOC and a contributor to this issue. Could you please just introduce yourself briefly and share your thoughts? You're muted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Yes, thank you, Catherine. My name is Louisa Onoha, and I am from Nigeria. I'm presently the chair of ICOM Nigeria, and I work in the museum. I work in the National Commission for Museums and Monuments. And in the museum, we have over 50 museum heritage sites, and some of them we can come under what we can call city museums. And so in Nigeria, I would speak for Nigeria, which I think practically covers for most African countries or West African countries. The term museum is not something that is indigenous to the African people. It's something that was placed upon us by colonialism. And so what we have been trying to do recently, like Hanna mentioned, in my article, I try to put an opening that decolonization means different things to different people in different regions and all of that. And so for us in Nigeria, what we're trying to do, because we have realized that that the museum is heavily colonized. It's the structure, the buildings, the way the displays are made and everything is purely something that has a lot of colonialism attached to it, even the narrative. So what I think and what we're doing right now is that we need to begin to challenge, the dominant narratives. We need to allow the people to tell their own stories. We're trying to do a lot of that in some of our museums. It's not easy, really, but we have been trying to do that with projects. There are case studies, So we're trying to allow people, the indigenous people, the marginalized voices to come in and, reframe these perspectives. And also we're also trying to do something that has that there's a global connection, no matter how we want to look at it. No one culture or no one tradition can exist alone on its own. And so that's what we're doing. And then we also know that there are day-to-day power dynamics that can hamper such things from happening. So we know that, and we try to put that into perspective in whatever we're doing. So basically, that's my intro for this. For instance, we know that there are trade relations that have existed way back before colonialism in Africa. And whatever it is that that colonization is, for us in Nigeria, came as a way of, the strife came as a way of trade, crisis in who controls what, and that's how all of it collapsed. And that's how we find most of our objects outside Nigeria, at least in some places. For instance, the Benin bronzes and all, there was some kind of disagreement. And so that led to what we have today, why the king was usurped, and why that whole problem came into existence. So those are the things that I can talk about, just a few of it. But in essence, in all of it, we in Nigeria have recognized that our museums, the word museum itself is alien to us. So we're trying all we can. And decolonization is not repatriation alone. Neither is it restitution. No, it goes beyond. It goes beyond that. So I will do that. I will use that as an intro. Thank you.
Super. Thank you, Louisa. Would anyone else like to comment about the relationship between the city, the region, the world, in terms of museums?
Me again,
Yes, that's great. Yes.
So I just want to use an example of Auckland Museum. We have introduced the voice of our Pacific Māori and Pacific women's work, because not only has our nation been decolonized, but so too has the woman's voice been shut out. And so we've introduced through the tonga for us are treasures, the textiles, the fibers, the work of the higher conscientization of our women's work through their voices, through their hands, their skills. And we work with community all the time. And we make sure that the museum ourselves, we don't position ourselves as the higher. We look to them towards asking them what they would like to see happening in our museums for them, and to connect to the collections.
Super, thank you. I just noticed that we've had a question appear in the chat, and I would like to encourage the participants in the room to put questions into the chat. Elka is going to be monitoring the chat. We have half a dozen questions or so for the panel just to warm things up, and then we will open it up to answering some of the questions from the chat. So if something twigs in your mind, please put a note in the chat and we'll get to it. Okay, so the next question I'd like to ask is, which communities affected by colonialism have you or will you focus on, and why? And to start that conversation, I'd like to invite Christine.
Hi, thank you, Catherine. Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, depending where you're from. My name is Christine Conciatori. I'm the director of the University of Alberta Museum. I'm also the vice president of ICOM Canada. I started my career in the City Museum in Montreal. Just to mention, I work in the museum within the university, so it's two colonial institutions. So we have the double whammy effect here of museum and universities. I'm based in Edmonton right now, which is a treaty territory. So it's Treaty 6. So it's the land, and I would like to acknowledge also that it's the land of the Cree, Blackfoot, Stoney Nakoda, the Deni, the Onodonashe, Anishinaabe and Métis people. So because we're clearly on their territory, these are the communities that we are focusing and our priority, of course, because this is the land that we are in and we need to acknowledge that. And other communities are also territories that are around, because we have ethnographic collection that touch territories, so Treaty 7, 4, and 8, so that's Alberta and Saskatchewan mainly. So these are the community we're focusing, because we have legacy collection and some very problematic collection that we need to actually unravel everything in the history of those collections, which explains why we're focusing on those collections there. I would say that this work, we think about collection, but it involves also the space that we are in. So historically, we also have some public artwork across campus. Some of them, the labels or even the representation of the history of the land created hurt. So I think one of the things also is to acknowledge message that we receive and to consult, and to be willing to actually remove either artwork to cover it in case where we can't remove it if it creates harm, and recognize that while it's a historical painting, this may not be appropriate to make a space that is for everyone, and have the courage to make decision regarding this after consultation, of course, but also rewriting, but not me holding the pen, involving the communities in what we interpret and write, and acknowledging that wrongs were made also in this public label that we have for artwork. So I would say it's our territory or the communities we're focusing on, but also the population that we have the collection, and that, as we say, we're a custodian, but should we have those collections? And this question cannot be asked just with the people working here. It has to be open to the communities also as well. Thank you. I'm going to stop there. I could work, but if there are questions, I'm happy to answer.
Sure, great. Thank you, Christine. Paolo, I'd like you to take a stab at this question as well. Your article in the special issue of the review was really all about your relationship to communities. So perhaps you could say something about the communities you work with.
Yeah, hello. I'm Paola Araiza from Mexico City. And for 3 decades, I have dedicated my professional life to art education, museology, and community-based cultural management. I have been a member to ICOM Science in 1917, and over these years, I have had to operating to contribute both ICOM Mexico and to SECA committee. In a SECA, I serve as a coordination and Mexico correspondent to SECA-LAC. I would like to start with the 3 experiences to have my understanding to decolonize thinking. The first is the academic perspective that came through to seminar organized by the Centro Cultural Tlatelolco, which focus on analyzing the colonial practice in museums. In other and me, a strong foundation to think critical about to the museums can engage with history, culture, and a community in meeting ways. The second is a collective participation. I have worked close with a college in museum education through SECA Special Interest Group. In particular, I was part of the group called Education in Museum at Decolonialism, where I served for 5 years to co-coordination and the led subgroup, the Binning Relationships. This experience taught me the value of collaboration, relation, building shared understanding among peers. The first is the practical perspective through the creation for a community museums in the basin of Mexico. Today is Iztapalapa. I was able to bring the collation thinking into actions. This space is inclusively participatory and deeply rooted in local knowledge and heritage. This hands-on work to reinforce the idea that the colonial approach are not only theoretical, but lived practicals and experience in real community. Together, these three experiences, academic, collective, and practical, have guided my approach to the museums and the community work. They remember that the decolonizing is not just about the ideas, to about the action, collaboration, and respect the communities we serve. I will leave my intervention here for now, and I like to development into this question after Christian participation. They want to talk about, and for that question, I return.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Would anyone else, any of the other contributors, like to make a comment about the communities that you work with and why?
Catherine, can I just make a comment?
Yes.
Sorry, it's Elka. So I just wanted to comment on Paola's intervention there, because I went to visit, I was in Mexico City about a month ago, and I went to visit two of the museums that Paola is talking about, the community museums that she was working with. And they are really some of the best community museums I've ever seen. They combine a number of functions. One of them has a laundromat in the basement, which is great. And they are in some of the poorest parts of the city, some of the most challenged parts of the city, and they are wonderful. They have murals, they have children's play areas, they have I don't know, just lots of community information, a lot of information about challenges that the communities face. And for me, that is, you know, it's decolonization kind of, you know, made manifest, if you like. And so thank you, Paola, for hosting me at both of those museums. I thought it was an amazing experience, and I hope I can visit the other ones next time I'm there.
Great, thanks, Elka. Any other contributor want to weigh in on this? Okay, so the next question is about how city museums themselves reflect colonialism and the efforts that people working in city museums have made to address the systemic legacies of colonialism. Flora was going to respond to this, but I see she's having technical problems with the connection. So Glenn,
I think I'm still here.
Oh, you are here. Oh, all right. Sorry, we've received a message saying you weren't, so it's great that you're here. Good.
Yeah, my battery's just hanging on there for its dear life.
Okay. Perfect.
All right, thank you.
No. Okay, you're mute.
That's okay. I was just exclaiming.
Okay. Well, I guess if her battery was hanging on for dear life, it's gone. Glenn, you said that you have had a message from her. Could you read that for us?
I can sort of, if it's okay with Flora,
sure.
I will just read what she was going to say. So good evening from Kenya. I'm Nguye Flora Mutere. I teach at the Technical University of Kenya. My PhD dissertation titled The Future of the Nairobi Railway Museum, Education and Decolonization in the Digital Age. And I just got a embarrassed faced emoji from her, so I hope I'm doing okay. So she goes on to say that in addressing systemic legacies of colonialism, I begin with context. That Silverman, Ubungu, and Probst present us with knowledge gap of her study, that within the studies of conceptualization of the African Museum, there are resounding calls to attend to the coloniality of museums. And the Nairobi Railway Museum sits inside that very question quite literally. For context, the East African Railway was built on conscripted and indentured labor. Thousands of South Asian workers and African workers were engaged to extract resources and consolidate British control in the region. So the first and honest perspective about the National Railway Museum, where she explored colonial legacies, is that the building you're standing in is the legacy as well as its collections. And the railway, it opened for travel in 1899, is itself the colonial artifact. So the question becomes, what can you do with it? Flora's effort has been about radically shifting who the museum speaks to and speaks for. That means centering the stories of the workers who built the line, not just the locomotives. It means engaging communities in Nairobi whose grandparents' labor made the city possible and asking them what they want remembered. It means being honest in the labels and not sanitizing the violence of the construction era. So first, a specific community engagement initiative capturing everyday life was for Flora the most meaningful work. It has been listening to the retirees and their families from the Kaloreri, Mutura, and the Makongeni, and I apologize for my pronunciation, the railway housing estates built for African workers who have generously shared oral histories and memorabilia spanning 1950 to 1970 to give the scope to the study. Those are the people who lived on the railway, who raised families in its shadow, and whose memory is the official record largely ignored. So bringing those voices into the museum, not just as footnotes, but as the story itself, is where the decolonization became real for her. It's not just a policy, it's a conversion with a station master who kept his staff uniform in the trunk for 60 years. So these testimonies are not just sentimental, they are redress. They managed to achieve the project through a pilot with the interactive media of design students in the Department of Design and Creative Arts Media in collaboration with Augsburg University of Applied Sciences, which held an exhibition at the museum titled Mobilitas. Researchers, bloggers, and bloggers examined and gave feedback to the design students about their concept, whose brief was to correct an official record that documented locomotives and administrators, but erased workers who built and ran the railway. Flora and her team became aware that to repair decades of erasure, non-being, and silences and dispossession of indigenous narratives, they had to shift their interpretive authority. When these families co-determine what is remembered and how, curatorial power moves from the institution to the community. Narratives that document enduring dispossession, the colonial labor policies, and the meager wages that shaped what these communities could build, own, and pass on. The personal testimony is the evidence of the archive is suppressed, and that is where sentiment becomes structural change. It's incomplete work. Colonial institutions don't decolonize overnight, but the commitment is to keep asking whose memory is being kept and whose is still being left on the platform.
Oh, that's great. I'm so sorry that Flora wasn't able to connect at this point. Perhaps she'll be able to join us later in the meeting. One of the speakers who was going to be on the panel this morning, actually two of them were unable to be here. And so I asked Elka if she would pick up on this question because this relates to the work that she's been doing in Ontario. So Elka?
Sure. Thanks, Catherine. And Rachel Roy asked a similar question in the chat. I'm not going to address directly, but I will say in my role as a museum advisor for the province of Ontario, I work with a lot of municipal museums, and the City of Toronto museums, Toronto Historical Museums in particular, have been working very, very, very hard over the last 5 years or so to try to be much more inclusive particularly of Indigenous communities, like the Mississaugas of the Credit, which is just outside of Toronto, the Haudenosaunee, who are on Six Nations Reserve, which is not far from Toronto, and a number of other Indigenous groups in sort of the northern area of the province, to give them a voice in Toronto city museums, which are extremely colonial. They're mostly a collection of historic houses from sort of late 18th, early 19th century, down to late 19th century. And so we don't have a civic museum per se. So a lot of stuff has been done virtually. A lot of stuff has been, there was a series a few years ago called Awakenings, where Indigenous artists were given voice digitally through the City of Toronto's online platform. And they're really making a big effort to try and integrate not just Indigenous, of course, but also Black voices, voices of people of color, and Asian voices, because Toronto is so multicultural. It's important for city museums to do that. But we also have other municipal museums in Ontario that are making a really big effort, again, often digitally or virtually, to connect with the local Indigenous communities in their area and to bring them into curating exhibits, creating artistic kinds of pieces, murals mostly, but also kinds of spoken word presentations, those kinds of things. And that has, in some cases, been like unbelievably successful. And so I think the impetus for a lot of this was the announcement in 2021 by the Kamloops group in British Columbia, that they had discovered 215 indications of 215 unmarked burials. And that really shocked a lot of Canadians into suddenly understanding that we had, as a society, been ignoring the fact that we had residential schools and we have reserves in places where people should probably not be living. And that the Indigenous population is living in, I would say, in a lot of cases, in third world conditions. So trying to make that kind of, that information available to people through museums and through museum exhibitions and online exhibitions, I think a lot of museums have kind of taken that to heart. And hopefully that's going to have some effect, at least for people who visit museums and in local communities. So I hope that answers the question, kind of. Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, Elke. Would anyone else like to comment on this question? Rachel was asking if we could extend this to the other panelists outside of Canada as well. Yes. Would anyone else like to comment?
Yeah. I just also want to mention the fact that how we've done some exhibitions, and one of them comes to mind, our Mana exhibition, which is about the protest in print. And we have badges, and I'm just going to hold up a badge here. I just grabbed it off my jacket as they were talking, and I thought Mana. So Mana is about the prestigious thoughts and minds of our Indigenous peoples, and the protest in print is about how the government political stances that a lot of our people have taken over the many years to bring back our language, to look at the what we call the dawn were known as the dawn raids, where police just went into homes and pulled out people, which mainly Pacific people, which they thought they were overstayers. And so now we have this exhibition with all of that, their side, their worldview of that story. And I want to acknowledge our curators, our co-curators on that, Wanda Edemir, Andrea, and Paula Legal, and they put together a whole lot of narratives and recorded people. And one of those persons, of course, this may be familiar to some of you, is her name is Linda Smith, wrote the book on decolonization, and her daughter was one of the ones that was interviewed in the Mana exhibition. So we've got the actual voices interviewed, playing over, and all their recordings, as well as images of the protests that happened at that time. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. I thought I saw Flora re-enter the room, but then I checked and I don't think she is there. So, the next question is also for Kahutoi to begin with, which is the question of what recommendations you have for city museums that manage colonial collections, but who do not have a local Indigenous community or a diaspora community related to those collections.
The funny thing is, when we talk about decolonization, it's sort of, I feel this question was kind of hard for me, but I'll give it a go. So first of all, my name is Kahutoi Te Kanawa. I come from a family of weavers, and that is my tupuna, my ancestors, the legacy that has been passed down. But to try and answer this question, I thought, what city has not got Indigenous peoples in the area? And my advice would be to start looking for the local Indigenous community and what collections connect to those people first and foremost. It's about strengthening the relationships with the people. Of course, in Auckland, we have a diversity of many Indigenous nations and cultures. And so our culture, Māori culture, is very, very strong. And so our connections to the Pacific as well. But dealing with a community that has collections, the colonial legacy of collections within our museum is not really something that I can relate to very well, because a lot of our collections are of Māori, Pacifica, and we have a few, from the Asian countries, but we have Asian communities. The building up a relationship of trust and authentic trust, and I say the authenticity of that trust has to come through acknowledging the connections and finding out more about the collections and the place of origin, as well as the customary practices that relate to the Indigenous people. So it really depends on which Indigenous peoples we're talking about as well. I think it's also about being willing to meet face to face, to have the conversation, to get to know them well, and to understand what is your intention. Is this about connecting the collections with Indigenous people, or is it about the museum collating more information with knowledge holders, with practitioners, with maybe academics, whatever field it is in? The intention has to be a reciprocation of sharing knowledge and passing that on. So, yeah, as I've said before, colonialism has had a big impact. So deconstructing that colonialism view takes a lot, because through assimilation and the indoctrination of our people, it's been an invasion. It is about the theft of collections. It is about the disparity between what is great for our nation as far as Indigenous peoples are concerned. And I also want to bring in, this is about the, United Nations of the Declaration of the Rights of the Indigenous People. We have to start displaying things from their worldview, our worldview, if that helps.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I guess I was thinking about European countries that might have Maori collections, but they don't have Maori people locally. So they have to get on a plane and go meet some Maori people.
I can chat. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Catherine, I think Christine might be a good person to comment on this too. I saw an email go by where she was commenting on it. Christine, would you care to weigh in?
Well, can we just let Kotoi finish first?
Awesome. So Māori people are well-traveled people too. And you would be surprised how many in different countries that have resided in different countries and settled. And that's why I said to start looking within your own community. And fair enough, if there's not many that are in that area, we have social media. We can make those connections just like what we're doing now. There's not a problem with that. Kia ora.
Okay, thanks. Christine?
I was wondering if Mabafokeng wanted to say something. I saw she removed her mute. So maybe if you have something, maybe you can go first.
Can you please remove me on mute because I think I'm connected to two devices?
Okay. Then
on this one. The other one, I don't know how connected to it.
I don't know. Doesn't seem to be a problem. So.
No, we can't hear an echo, so it's fine.
So I'm just gonna follow up, Elke, what you said. When I arrived 3.5 years ago in this position and where I am now at the University of Alberta and saw some collection, I think the first thing, it's due diligence. So basically is, what do you know about the collections? In some cases, and for us, it's Canadian Indigenous collections, a lot that we had, but also do some provenance research. So to start that, because the idea was not to put the onus of the work on the community, but first do what we could do ourselves, and then share that with the community, what we gather and invite them to the collection. A lot of communities did not know what we had in terms of holding from their heritage. And in some cases, there was one community that thought that this specific type of weaved bag, they thought there were only 3 left. And actually we have 16 in very good condition. So, because these are academic collection, they were used for research, not as much for exhibition. Meaning that reconnecting people with, but we made that effort to actually, as was said just before, people have social media, people have website. We organize Zoom calls, and we had photos taken and shared with the community, good resolution photos. So I think there's a way that geography is not always an obstacle. You have to say what you can do to reach out. Another thing also that I want to say is there are funding programs to help to bring people in. And that's another thing that I feel it's my duty to do, is find financial help to have the elders come and see those collections. It is long-term work. It's not something that will happen quickly. And I think this is also part of our effort, is that communities don't have to work with our timelines. We have to work with their timelines also. So I think it's when they're available, when they get an understanding that for communities, this can be re-traumatizing also, to see some very important belonging being stored in shelves or in boxes that have been dissociated from their communities of origin. And that museum may not have we may have taken good care of those belongings in terms of conservation, but maybe not spiritually. And I think this is also when you make that effort to reach out, that you can actually change that and involve them. But yes, again, like, you do your due diligence, you do the provenance research, but it's not extractive, it's a dialogue, and you share what you have found. And when you meet with people, you can gather knowledge, but it's with informed consent. They may not want to share that knowledge, and it's fine, because these are their belongings also. And I think it's a shift in how we see our work and collection, that we share this authority. And it's not just the museum and me and my team saying what we do. So it is doable. We have collection, of course, a lot from Canada, but we have some from around the world. So I said I put a priority on our territory because we are located on a specific territory. So this is the priority. But this is work that will happen for decades, as we have collection from pretty much every part of the world.
Okay. Thanks, Christine. Louisa, you wanted to make a comment?
Yes, my take on this is that museums who have such collections, of indigenous people, and they don't have them around where they are. I mean, it's in this present world that we live in, I don't think it's a difficult thing. And I doubt if there's anywhere where any museum where there are collections that you don't get even 1, 2, 3, 4 people who are from, that region around you. Like we have mentioned here, I mean, there's the social media. We could use that. It is only for the museums to come out and be truthful and honest with what program they actually what they want to do, if they really want to respect the collection they have and the people who own those collections, and make them available to these people, so that they can have they can reframe the stories, the colonial narratives around this collection. That's one. Then 2, for instance, in Nigeria, we have several ethnic groups, and somebody for instance, if you're Yoruba, you may not know much about the Igbo object or artifact. And then research, yes. But, there's a way we need to do these things. We need to get to those people, because if, for instance, if I'm in somewhere maybe in the UK, and I'm not working in the museum, and I'm from Nigeria, and I'm shown an object from Hausa land, I may not know a thing about it if I don't have cause to go research about it or find out what it is for. So I think we should first, as museums, start with wanting to bring these voices in, wanting to have them come and, help us, not help, but work with us in conjunction, do things together, so that we can come out with the real truth about what we keep. Because most of the narration about these objects, when you get to places, you find out that they're not really, I won't say that they're fake, but I mean, they're not adequate, or not even what it is. So anyhow, we just need to, museums should not use that excuse of not having the indigenous people around there. No, it's not tenable now. Let's let's explore social media. Let's keep advocating. Of course, we'll find people. So that's my take about that. Thank you.
Thanks,
Can I
Louisa.
just chime in? Can I just chime in here, Catherine? Sorry.
Okay.
I just wanted also mention that with Te Aho Mutunga Kore, which is the hub that we have with the Māori and Pacific Development, we work with communities all the time. We have language weeks on those, so it could be Niuean, could be Tokelau, could be Samoan, Māori. We have these language weeks. We bring out the artifacts or we call them taonga, treasures of the textiles. We keep them have them in a space, and we invite people to come in, and we let them view their taonga. That's the narrative here, and so that they can share. And they bring. We also have their tamariki, the children that they speak their language, and they have their performances. When this happens all the time, it becomes normal. So we normalize the narrative of Indigenous minds, but especially at the younger age, and that will grow our people's strength of different types of cultures that we have within our cities. Kia ora.
Great. Thank you. Prachi, did you have some thoughts on this as well?
I think I share a lot of the collective sentiment from multiple speakers here. But the fact of if there is a missing community, I think that's the major step for a critical inquiry for the museum to do. But it is also an opportunity for the museum to get creative, since the burden of initiation rests on the museum, and it's a very humbling opportunity for it to step down to the pedestal and say, we don't have the answers. It becomes, we have the digital tools and we have an array of technology now, which creates a lot of listening labs, a lot of spaces to tap into different kinds of community, including students, including tourists. But it is also a way of rethinking that boundaries do not have to control the collections in one space. Collections can move to the source communities wherever they are. So if the people are not around, then can the collections go to the people for that conversation to happen if the museum really, really wants to do it? And then that becomes a new space for creating face-to-face dialogues, for bringing research and a whole lot of information and knowledge holders, which may not exist around the museums wherever they are, but that does not mean the source communities don't exist and there are no ways to get in touch with them. So there are multiple opportunities, including getting very creative. And I think the world that we live in allows us to even create open databases today, which helps brings voices into the museums. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Prachi. We just have one final question from our side, and then we'd like to open it up to people in the audience to ask questions of the panel. So this question is really about today's reality. We're living in a period of neocolonialism and expansionism. What can we learn from the legacies of colonialism to try to deal with our present realities? So Mabafokeng, could you tackle that one for us, please?
Evening, everyone. Greetings from Ethiopia. My name is Mabafokeng Hoeane. I'm a curator and a conservator based in South Africa, currently a researcher at the University of South Africa at the Chief Albert Luthuli Chair. This is a big question, especially as a young person to tackle, because it's looking at the past. But I prepared something small, and then I'll comment on tying it in as a young African person on the continent to the exhibition that I did that's on the publication. So I'll just turn off my camera so that I don't lose network. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So in an era marked by neocolonial entanglements and renewed forms of expansionism, the past cannot be understood as a distant, static archive confined to memory or record. Rather, from an African perspective, it exists as a living reservoir for knowledge, dynamic, embodied, and continuous shaping of the present. This past is not only written histories, but oral tradition, ritual practices, material cultures, and the everyday lives of communities. It is through these living archives that Africa remembers, resists, reimagines itself beyond the constraints imposed by the colonial and neo-colonial systems. Neocolonialism, as it manifests today, often operates through economic dependency, cultural domination, epistemic control. It is less overwrought than earlier forms of colonial rule, yet equally insidious in the ability to shape how African societies see themselves and their place on this world. Expansionism similarly persists in new disguises through global capital, extractive industries, and the continued marginalization of indigenous knowledge system. In this context, the past becomes a crucial site of intervention. It offers not only a record of what has been lost or taken, but also a blueprint for surviving and regeneration. African histories are replete with examples of resilience, self-determination, from pre-colonial governance and trade to anti-colonial liberation struggles. African societies have consistently demonstrated the capacity to adapt, resist, assert autonomy. These histories challenge dominant narratives that position Africa as passive or dependent, instead foregrounds agency, creativity, intellectual depth. They remind us that resistance is not a singular event, but an ongoing process, one that is deeply rooted in cultural and collective identity. So this comes from the exhibition that we did. So I'm from the University of South Africa, which is an institution that's over 150 years old. And the exhibition that I did was the first time where we had a Black solo artist, Tong Kabeya, who's from Congo, a curator, Turufatso Sioka, which is a Black woman, and conservator, which is Mabafokeng, which is me, in the history of the institution, right? Meaning the reimagining of when you open up collections, because I had a conversation with Tong in terms of what inspired him to do the work that he does, because he's from a lineage of healers and he finds ways in using his artwork as a way of reimagining himself. And from that exhibition, it was more about how do Africans reimagine themselves? How does the youth reimagine itself beyond neocolonialism or what has been imposed on us? Because one thing I don't think we've noticed, or one thing I've noticed, is that the reason why we want the collections to open up and museums to be truthful about what's in the collections is so that we can reimagine ourselves and get inspired as contemporary artists. Because the idea of always keeping Africa as stagnant or passive is what we fight against as the next generation. So I don't know if that answers the question, but in summary, connecting it in terms of the work that we've been doing, and there've been a lot of call towards Africanization within the people that I work with, more than decolonization, because it feels like decolonization focuses more on what has been done to us than what we can reimagine ourselves to be. So I hope that opens up the conversation, but personally, it's just a big question to answer as a young person in terms of how can we learn from the past, because we're looking to learn from you guys, but the only way we could learn from the previous generation is if the collections are open up and we have a frank conversation in terms of, are we just hoarding, and why are we keeping those if we're not trying to prove domination and keep up with neocolonialism? I hope that answers that.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to turn it over to Elke now to see if we can get some questions from people on the floor. I'm not sure what's in the chat, whether there are questions there, or if anybody from the floor would like to put their hand up and ask a question. Elke, over to you.
Thanks, Catherine. I don't actually see any more questions in the chat. But
there were a couple from Rachel I saw.
Yeah. So Rachel has her hand up, and Paula does too. So I'm going to invite Rachel to go ahead and unmute and talk about whatever you'd like to talk about. Rachel?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I can't show my video at the moment, but thank you can you hear me?
We can.
Can you hear? Okay, sorry. Yeah, so I thank you very much for these answers. I do feel like the question I asked is related to what the last panelist was talking about. I just had a question specifically about the idea of repatriation. I know that at least in Canada, in the context of city museums, it can be a challenge because you face barriers within the museum itself and the protocols, as well as the government that might be funding the museum. So I was just wondering if the panelists could speak to repatriation, about projects that you are doing, about challenges you may face with the structure, or you could say the colonial structures that exist still in museums and government.
So any of the panelists can weigh in on this. Luisa, Kahutoi, Maba, which one of you and Prachi?
I've actually been through a lot of been part of some repatriation of koiwi bones and in different artifacts. And it's been a very hard process. Although I'm not in the department that does a lot of work with a lot of repatriations. So it can be within our own country out south with different tribes or iwi, repatriation. But a couple of years ago, there were a whole lot of skulls brought back from Europe, and it's happening on a regular basis. In our National Museum, Te Papa deal with a lot of these repatriations. The ceremony, the cost that has to go through, but it's not. I'm not talking about financial costs, but the cost of the generations that have missed out on having their ancestors back home is gone through generations. But I do want to touch on a particular piece that we've just brought back. It's called a poku. A poku is a war cloak, and we know of several poku in the world, and they're mainly in one in Dublin, and then there's the Pitt Rivers Museum, the Oriental Museum, who was in agreement of us bringing the poku, it's a war cloak, back. And my sister, older sister, is a textile conservator, had to go over, treat this poku because it was over 200 years old, we think. And so to repatriate this work back also meant it was the poku was bringing back knowledge to us as weavers. So we're going to be having a symposium, and we've got our knowledge holders, the taumata mare kura. Taumata mare kura are the experienced weavers who came in, and we had a hui, a get together over a weekend to be in awe of this poku, but we treat our taonga like living collections because they're imbued in this textile as the knowledge of our ancestors. And so we're doing a lot of research on that. And same with the te rā, which is the only known Māori sail that has been on loan from the British Museum. You know, a hand on heart, we would love te rā to stay home with us. But the laws have it where it has to be returned. So the repatriation is a long process, but not only financially, over the generations. And we want to make sure that the next generations learn about what repatriation means to us as an Indigenous people. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else want to weigh in on that one? I see a bunch of hands up. Paola, did you, you're kind of next. Did you want to speak?
Okay, thank you, Elka. I would like to answer a racial question in the channel, and I would like to complete my participation. In the interview to Elka conducted with me for the CAMOC magazine, I spoke about the community museum for the Pueblo of Santiago Acahualtepec, Ocho Barrios, and San Lorenzo Tezonco, Santa Marta Catitla. These museums are located in the basin of the Mexico and the land crisscrossed by canals, fed by the Great Lakes of Texcoco and Chalco. This weight gave a lift of the Chinampas, shaping fair life, brevant, and landscape. In these lands, indigenous people with a deep pre-Hispanic roots on tree braid, their culture, social organization, and ways of life were near Ireland's during colonization. For this reason, these four museums I not recognize their community with a legacy. They show the heritage is not distant memory, but a living inheritance. Still present the land among these people. Today, several centuries later, these communities are part in the indigenous people with a struggle to survive to the marginalization. Sorry, my pronunciation. They have been absorbed by urban growth and now reside on the periphery of the Mexico City and the area with approximately 2 million people. I believe this area is still a social and government structure operating from a colonized mindset. Working in this territory requires understanding these hybrid populations where a rural and urban elements converge. Tradition and customs ally these communities and through reliance to culture advice. More this simple dismating is with benefit this sector. I hope readers can consult to the art tool, understands approach with a social museology, participant community culturation, and ethic museography. This approach allowed the community to engage the colonial practice, showing to more solid, and he expects for participation, recognizing a culture empowerment. Thanks.
Thank you, Paula. I can't remember if it was Christine or Luisa next, but Christine, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you. To answer Rachel's question about issues internally, again, I'm at a university, an academic museum institution. The process is very long to get something moving. It's a big university also, so there's many layers about our governor. So our processes are extremely colonial. Everything goes through lawyers, so we're still very much in the colonial model, even though we're really working and we have an indigenous strategic plan. It's not just deconstructing the museum, it's deconstructing the university at the same time. Things are getting better in the last couple of years, but I would say a big issue, and it's mentioned in the chat, is financial also. So finding the funds to do the consultation, to do it in an open and truthful manner with the time it takes and to meet the people. So that means also having people come over, opening the collection. I would say for on my side, the biggest issue is also because we're a research institution. There's a little bit of the fear that we're losing object, which they don't belong to us. And they were acquired over 100 years ago in at best nebulous way, but most probably in not a consent way that these collection came in. So it's just to move away from this idea that we're orders of potential research. So I would say this is a big challenge I have at the university, is that it feels like we're holding to something, although even if some objects are not used for research at the moment. And also they would not be appropriate for research without consent. So that's a big, UNDRIP helps. And you mentioned also something about UNDRIP. I do use it a lot because there's, especially Article 11 and 12 of UNDRIP, about who's the owner of indigenous belonging. So I think it's important to recenter on this. But yes, financial, but also I think traditional institutional views on what collection and belongings are a big obstacle. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Christine. And yes, the research question has always been a tricky one when it comes to repatriation, especially for archaeologists and paleontologists who, well, we must have these 16 examples of a skull because blah, blah, blah. And you're going to do what with it? You're going to rebury it? Yeah, no, it's always been a really difficult one to argue against and also just deal with in general, I think. Next, Luisa. Luisa, you said you wanted to, you have your hand up, so I thought you should be next.
Yes, thank you, Elka. I would like to share or throw some light on Rachel's question about repatriation. Repatriation is really, really complicated. And it's complicated because most institutions or most organizations or countries do not want to return. That's the way I see it. I may be wrong, but I think those who want to return, for instance, those who want to return treasures back to Nigeria have done so. But some people still keep coming up with excuses like the policies, surrounding repatriation in our country does not allow to give back. And here I speak mostly about these treasures that were taken away, that were taken away unethically, so to speak. Yes. I may excuse those objects that were bought or, given as gifts and are still being used in universities for research, or I may say, okay, I mean, that could be a conversation that we could keep for later. But there are some institutions who just wrap this difficulty around wanting to repatriate, and that affects the country that they're supposed to, that they need to give back to. So in my own institution, the major challenge at a point in time was who to give back to. Is it the indigenous community or the government institution? And in my country, the government institution has been given that approval, to keep every artifact. And so, but now there has been, there are dynamics, power dynamics of who, so all of that actually makes repatriation, either from where it's coming to or where it's going to, a bit complicated and difficult. And of course, we've also had some institutions that would say, okay, we want to return, but we can't do the insurance. We do not have the finances. And of course, I mean, I don't know that African country that would want to bring up money for that will want to pay for, insurance or bringing back any work. It's a bit complicated. So we've faced a lot of difficulties. We've faced difficulties of the power play. In fact, repatriation on its own itself is not, as far as I know, is colonized. It's back to what we're trying to stay away from, back to what we're trying to avoid. So yes, that's what I want to say. It's very, very complicated. It's complicated, but I think in all, we can always collaborate. We can leave some out. We can find a level playing ground for everybody, and everybody will be happy. But it shouldn't. If you've taken something unethically, it's just okay that you should return it or make an agreement, something that everybody's happy with. Thank you.
Thank you, Louisa. Maba, I'm very happy to have you next. If you could be fairly quick, we are getting over time. We have a Sasha Priya who would like to say a few words at the end. So if you could be a little quick, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, I'm gonna be quick and I'm gonna summarize it, but going on what Louisa is saying and what Rachel's question was, two things. Repatriation is not enough. It's not enough to take objects and then dump them on African institutions when we know it takes money to conserve them. It takes provenance, it takes research. What is needed is collaboration. And back to the point I made earlier on, the only way we can do this is we open up the collections so we can identify where objects are, so we can take the sacred objects, the spiritual objects, and understand that there is everyday use African objects, and I can only speak from an African perspective, right? And then that's sacred objects. And then from there, we can take it down by down, in sections, because we need collaboration with the communities themselves, because there's a problem between those that know these objects and youth like us that don't even know which these objects are. And the way they were collected violently, there's an erasure where objects were given the wrong provenance. So while we still have people that still have memory to remember these objects, we mustn't act like it's so complicated to do. Open up the collections, and then from there we can identify which ones need more immediate attention, and then we can work from there, right? And coming from a country like South Africa, is we even have a problem within our collections where we have other people's objects, right? But then the main thing is about the liberation movement, which is a certain period in our history, while other objects suffer. So it's a complex thing, but it's doable in our lifetime with collaboration with the originating communities. It's not that difficult. But one thing I've noticed when I go across the continent is, for example, in Dakar, the Black Civilization Museum, they've had the French government only return one sword, and they're supposed to return hundreds of objects. So even the promises that the government put and do this whole PR thing, can they be held accountable to that? I understand that lockdown broke down a lot of communication or how we saw things. But in summary, repatriation is not enough. There's more to it, because even within African countries and African societies, they're still healing themselves and they want to reimagine themselves. You might think those objects are important, but they're not important for those communities. And we can only have that if it's transparent, I guess. I hope that summarizes it.
All true. All absolutely true. Thank you very much. So I would like to thank everyone who participated in this webinar so much. This has been really interesting and very illuminating for me personally. And I think we should try and do this again, actually. And I'd like to introduce Sasha Priye, who is the current president of ICOM Canada and one of our co-collaborators on this website, to say a few words at the end. Thank you.
So hello everyone, whenever you are. And it's been such a pleasure to listened into this very rich conversation over the past 1.5 hours. I mean, there's so much more to be said, and I think the conversation is just scraped at the tip of the iceberg. And I'd like to join Elka in thanking all of the speakers for a really wonderful discussion, for a rewarding, rich discussion, a lot of food for thought, and maybe offer just a couple of closing reflection. One word that I heard was normalization. The way I think I heard it phrased was about normalizing the experience of being indigenous in a museum space. I'd like to, at the same time, flip it on its head and say, it has to be normal. The decolonial practices in museums need to become normalized, a reflex rather than reactionary. And I think that's why the work of the working group and future standing committee of ICOM on decolonization is so important, because it will help, hopefully, ingrain these practices in museums, whether they have colonial collections, indigenous collection or not. I think it needs to be extended across the board as a reflex, as an embodied practice of the sector. And the second point I'd like to make is, and we heard this quite clearly, the continuum of local to global. We've heard that everything, all museum politics is local. And of course, it has to be very grounded in the experience where a museum is located. But at the same time, it's a global conversation. And we're often, by thinking about this within national context, we forget that this is actually a local global conversation. And that's why this conversation today was so important. That's why the work of the ICOM working was so important, because it takes us out of national lenses and into global lenses, where without neglecting the local the specifics of the context in which all of this is happening. And that's why I would like to encourage us to maintain this global lens on this and maintain a global way of looking into this. And I'd like to congratulate CAMOC for a really wonderful journal issue, a really rich journal issue. I'd like to thank all contributors. I'd like to thank CAMOC and CAM for the partnership, and I very much look forward to continuing this. Thank you very much also to our audience for being part of this, for the rich commentary in the chat. Looks like there's appetite for more. Let's take this as a hint. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. And